Sam, in the sort of limited time we have left, I know we're getting to the end here. I did want to touch
Yep.
base with you about white supremacy a little bit and manifestos because I took some criticism years ago when I said an Islamic a terrorist or perpetrator who states that their motivations were related to Islam should be considered genuine and serious, and while there may be other aggravating factors which we can talk about, that needs to be taken seriously, and I believe that. And in the same way, when I hear about, a perpetrator that is apparently a white supremacist who was participating in all of the known places on the internet, which I don't even need to name, and there's no
Mhm.
point in naming them, and they say that these were motivating factors. I believe, unless I have a really specific reason to think otherwise, I also believe that they're genuine. And I've seen that you've talked about the idea of those right wing shooters, sometimes, in your opinion, writing a semi bogus manifesto, maybe to confuse the media, maybe to get attention. And I definitely don't see it that way, absent some evidence that would change my mind. So I'm curious how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, well, it was just based on hearing some evidence or alleged evidence in that area. And I'm actually, my next podcast is going to be with Kathleen Belew, who's a historian on this topic of white supremacy. So I'll sort of dive deeper into that and get a little more of an education there. But um, yeah, I mean, the issue seems to be that there's this other variant of, troll culture that is attracting in many cases, mentally unstable, isolated, socially isolated young men, some percentage of whom are just kind of viewing opportunities for violence as a kind of video game. And this gets mixed in with, some level of racism or white supremacy or misogyny or all of those things. And it's not clear what really is the motivating factor. I mean, so and again, in some cases, violence is overdetermined, right? So you have someone who is mentally ill, but is also enamored of some bad, violence producing ideas, and may also have a legitimate grievance in the world, right? And then that person goes into a synagogue or a mosque or a school and kills people, and then we're left trying to sort out what was really the operating variables. But there are pure cases, right, of all of these things too, where it's just you have psychologically normal people who are motivated clearly by ideas, and they state those ideas, and there's no reason to doubt them, right? And so there are clear cases of every type. Um, I think it's far more common to have socially marginalized, psychologically unwell people go in and shoot up schools. Um, and I think it's also far more common to have people fitting that type join white supremacist organizations than it is to have those variables be the explanation for jihadism. I mean, the reason why I think jihadism is different than, and I did a solo podcast on this topic, differentiating jihadism from white supremacy. Um, I think it is an importantly different set of ideas and most important in a different context, right? Jihadism is an extremist set of ideas set within a mainstream religion, and disentangling those ideas from the mainstream religious ideas that people truly care about, that more than a billion people truly care about, is genuinely difficult, right? And entails theological hair splitting that is frankly not very convincing, right? So it's a hard problem, and it's for that reason attracting far more straightforwardly religious, normal people into its ranks. White supremacy is not quite the same, right? It's not. It doesn't have. It has links to Christianity, but the links are not as direct, and they're not as broad, and they're not as connected to other things that are good about Christianity. right? The things that normal people really want about Christianity. And so I think it is filtering for, on balance, more deranged people, more marginal people, people who have less opportunity and more grievances or pseudo grievances. Um, but then there are cases where, the violence is coming from, just psychopathy or uh, other psychopathology, right? Where then whatever lip service may or may not be paid to ideas, it really is just lip service. It's not really the ideas, and you don't know until you know. But I mean, I'll point as an example, like I think the Columbine shooting is often talked about in the context of these, online discussions of white supremacist violence. And I think Eric Harris, in his journals, wrote a fair amount about, white supremacy. But no one who's really looked at the details of the Columbine shooting thinks that this is a clear case of white supremacist violence. I mean, these were really disturbed young men who decided to kill their classmates. And this was not the Oklahoma City bombing, which was clearly ideological. Um, and so it's just you just don't know until you know. And when I spoke about the El Paso shooting and even the Christchurch shooting, it just wasn't totally clear to me what was what in terms of those manifestos.